So a pretty quiet, underwhelming, uneventful day one of free agency, at least as it pertains to the Bulls. But even the Bulls aside, the NBA as a whole was awfully quiet for what used to be a day in which about 50% of free agents would sign in the first few hours. The names of signed players would roll in with those first few minutes of free agency opening. Hell, remember when Lonzo Ball signed with the Bulls like 2 minutes after free agency began? And then of course the Bulls got fined a second round pick for tampering. So yeah, I guess these new rules and punishments for tampering prior to the start of free agency are kind of working, which I'll be honest kind of sucks because it made for a boring day across the NBA world. So many people were hosting live streams just kind of sitting around waiting for something to happen of more substance than Luke Cornett or Kevin Love re-signing with their own teams. But anyway, day one is in the books. I'm recording this late at night on the 30th and we'll have it go live in the morning. So it's possible things have drastically shifted, whether it be for the Bulls or other teams by the time you're watching this. But I did want to highlight some of the key takeaways from the first day of free agency, at least for areas that have some impact on the Bulls. I'll have more details on other free agency news on my NBA channel and One Hoops, so feel free to check out that channel if you're interested. We're actually nearing 75,000 subscribers on that channel, so be sure to check it out. But anyway, let's talk about the Bulls. So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Now, of course, the biggest piece of news which actually came through last night, so before free agency opened, was that the Bulls signed Patrick Williams to a 5-year, $90 million deal, which I talked about in that video breaking the news, and I will have a more in-depth video on that contract, especially once we have more details on the incentives attached to the deal, whether the contract is front-loaded or back-loaded. But as I said in that video, that actually was a really good value deal for Patrick Williams. I know some Bulls fans who are down and out on Pat and I've called him a bust and are up in arms seeing him get a $90 million deal. But what you have to understand is that the 3 and D level players in the NBA are paid at a premium in this league. And Patrick is shown to be a high-level defender. He's big, strong, lengthy, but can also shoot threes at a 40+% clip. If you put aside that he was the number 4 overall pick, because I think that's the biggest sticking point for Bulls fans on why they can't get on the Patrick Williams train. Just his value for him as a role player, even if it means he's nothing more than a high-level role player who can consistently give you good defense and help space the floor on offense. At $18 million a year in today's NBA for the next 5 years, but the salary cap is projected to go up 10%, that contract is going to look more and more favorable as time goes on, and is very likely going to be at the mid-level exception type money by the 4th or 5th year of his contract when he's in the peak of his prime. It makes it an easy contract to trade if they need to pivot, and it becomes an incredible value deal if Pat finally starts to take off, especially with the assumption that he's going to be given more opportunity if DeMar or Zach are gone, if not both being gone. More touches, more reps, more shots, all while he's still not in his prime yet. We can clown the Bulls front office for a lot of the things and the decisions they've made in recent years. This is not one of them. They actually handled this negotiation well, and this has the potential of being a low-risk, high-reward deal. Now, as it relates to some of the things that have transpired thus far in free agency and how it potentially impacts the Bulls, well, one, Andre Drummond will not be returning, which we already knew was likely going to be the case, but he signed a 2-year, $10 million deal with the Philadelphia 76ers to be Joel Embiid's backup. It's a good pickup for the Sixers, for arguably the best backup 5 in the NBA. Drummond was great for the Bulls this past season. Loved everything that he did. Hustled when he was on the court, brought the energy. Yeah, boneheaded plays here and there, but man was a beast on the boards and actually played like he wanted to be there. But it was very unlikely that he was going to be returning with the Bulls this season. What annoys me about this signing, though, is that it was reported by multiple outlets, including KC Johnson and NBC Sports Chicago, that the Bulls had actually received interest from multiple teams, including the Sixers, who had offered the Bulls multiple second-round picks for Andre Drummond at the trade deadline. I believe it was reported up to 3 second-round picks, and the Bulls said no. No, because they wanted to make the playoffs, which they did not do. And now, Andre Drummond leaves for nothing. And look, I know it's just second-round picks, but when it's for an aging vet who you know you're likely not going to keep beyond that season, why would you not just take those picks? Hell, even if just to use them in a future trade, you could have maybe attached a couple of those picks in a package with Zach LaVine as a sweetener. Yeah, it just boggles my mind. and how narrowly focused this front office was in finishing out the season. But anyway, of course, we also had other signings of players that were potentially linked to the Bulls, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope being one of them, although I never really bought into that being a thing, as the Bulls wouldn't have been able to afford him, and he just doesn't make sense for the Bulls anymore given their pivot to a presumed rebuild. But he signs with the Orlando Magic, so that's no longer a thing. The Warriors, they waived Chris Paul, which took away any opportunity for the Bulls to execute a sign and trade of some kind, whether it be for Zach LaVine or DeMar. The Spurs eventually picked up Chris Paul in a one-year deal, but what blew my mind and what we learned after the Warriors waived Chris Paul is that the Bulls actually offered the Warriors Zach LaVine for Chris Paul and Andrew Wiggins, and the Warriors said no and would subsequently go on to waive CP3. First and foremost, I'm actually glad this trade didn't go down, because by making that trade, the Bulls would have had to guarantee Chris Paul's $30 million and would have to work out a buyout of some kind to remain below the tax, since that package would have meant the Bulls would take on more money in that deal. And then for Andrew Wiggins, I am not a Wiggins fan, not a fan of his game or his work ethic. And while his contract isn't as hefty as Zach's on an annual basis, he still has 3 more years left on his deal, just like Zach LaVine. It doesn't put the Bulls in that much better of a situation than where they are by just keeping Zach. But the bigger thing I want to say on this narrative around Zach LaVine and the level of disrespect and how his value is being seen around the NBA is off the charts right now. Yeah, I've given my fair share of criticism of Zach LaVine over the years, ever since starting this channel. I've never been the biggest fan of Zach LaVine. Sometimes I might have been a little too harsh on him sometimes. But I also recognize that Zach LaVine is still one of the more efficient elite scorers in the NBA, a supreme athlete, and does have value in this league. People are acting like this is Ben Simmons or Joakim Noah when he signed his contract with the Knicks and was untradeable after that. You heard Bobby Marks say that the Bulls are trying to attach a first-round pick just to get off Zach's contract. They might even have to attach 2 first-round picks. What? I know he's on a max contract. He's not a max level player, which I said years ago, by the way, when the Bulls were contemplating on giving him max. I know he still has 3 years left on his deal. And I know these types of contracts are considered a negative asset under the new CBA, but come on now. Like, at that point, just keep Zach LaVine. Have him play a bit to regain some of his value and then trade him before the deadline, because this is just getting ridiculous at this point. This is still a good basketball player, not a washed, injury-laden has-been. The dude can still ball. It just blows my mind. But anyway, I think the biggest thing on Bulls fans' minds right now is what's going to happen with DeMar. He's the only remaining free agent from last year's roster. Pat re-signed, Torrey Craig picked up his player option, which was a huge surprise considering he likely could have gotten the same amount of money on another contending level team, but chose to stay with a youth movement type team that is probably not going to win many games. That was pretty strange to me. And then of course, Drummond leaving in free agency. And for DeMar, I think all of this hinges on what's going to happen with Paul George, which we know at this point is that he's not going to return to the Clippers. The Clippers already announced that. And while we don't know definitively, at the time of this recording anyway, where Paul George is going to be going, it's more than likely going to be with the Sixers on a max deal. Now, most people figured, well, if PG leaves, they're likely going to pursue DeMar DeRozan as his replacement because the Clippers are still going to be trying to win now with Kawhi and Harden. Well, the problem now is that the Clippers also just signed Derrick Jones Jr. to a 3-year, $30 million deal, which is going to eat up most of their mid-level exception, which means outside of a sign and trade of some kind, there isn't a path for the Clippers to land DeMar DeRozan. I mean, maybe they trade Norman Powell or PJ Tucker to the Bulls to get DeMar, but I don't really see the Bulls being interested in that. Would they maybe part ways with Trey Mann to get DeMar DeRozan? I don't see the Clippers wanting to do that. So I don't really see how DeMar DeRozan lands in LA with the Clippers because it can only happen via a sign and trade now, and I don't see a trade where both sides would agree. Now, he could go to the Lakers if LeBron does in fact take a pay cut, which most are speculating that he will. Maybe they could offer the full mid-level exception to DeRozan, but they're also trying to pursue Klay Thompson for the mid-level. So yeah, I have a hard time seeing DeMar go there as well. If Paul George does in fact go to the Sixers on a max deal and they give Maxey a rookie max extension, they also sign Drummond and Kelly Oubre, they're now in a position where they can't offer DeMar that much either. So I mean, it's just the first day of free agency. I know that, really the first few hours, and a lot can change quickly, but I have a hard time seeing a pathway for DeMar getting to another team unless he takes a massive pay cut, which who knows, maybe he'll be willing to do that at this stage in his career as he looks to win a championship. But I don't know. Now I'm kind of almost going back to where I was before, maybe thinking that DeMar stays, not because the Bulls don't want to try and move him, but more so because there aren't many options for him to go to another team. and maybe they try to sign him and trade him at some point during the season, where more options become available for teams that are looking for that added piece to get them over the top. I don't know, it's going to be interesting to see how these next 48 hours go and see what deals go down. It's very possible I'm already putting out reaction videos to some of these signings in that first day by the time you're watching this. But let me know what you guys think, what your thoughts have been on free agency thus far. Let me know in the comments. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.